The Obama administration has had its own checklist for how a two-state solution could be reached. It's called on the Palestinian Authority to take steps to protect the security of Israel, to reduce anti-Israel sentiment, and to stop incitement to violence. It says Hamas must stop its arms build-up and militant activities in Gaza and recognise Israel's right to exist. And it's asked Israel to create conditions for a viable Palestinian state and to stop building settlements on occupied land. And it says that's the reason why the US abstained from the UN Security Council vote condemning Israel over settlement construction.
The two-state solution is the only way to achieve a just and lasting peace between Israelis and Palestinians. It is the only way to ensure Israel's future as a Jewish and democratic state.
The high-profile comments have outraged Israel's Prime Minister.
Israelis do not need to be lectured about the importance of peace by foreign leaders.
The Palestinian Authority says it's ready to restart talks, but first, settlement construction has to stop.
President Abbas is fully convinced that a just, comprehensive, and lasting peace can be achieved and is doable.
Under Benjamin Netanyahu's government, settlement construction has continued. Apart from a 10-month freeze from 2009 in a bid to restart peace talks. There are now more than 230 settlements on occupied land in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, with more than 550,000 Jewish settlers. Under international law, the settlements are illegal because they're built on land captured during the 1967 war. But the government is supported by the person who'll be in charge of US-Israel policy for the next 4 years.
I'm very, very strong on Israel. I think Israel's been treated very, very unfairly by a lot of different people.
Barack Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu have had a notoriously strained relationship. At one point, the two didn't meet face-to-face for more than a year. With Obama's Iran deal infuriating the Israeli Prime Minister, who broke from diplomatic protocol and addressed US Congress at the invitation of the Republicans. During Obama's presidency, the US has tried twice to broker a peace deal between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, and failed. But under his tenure, the US has agreed to give Israel $38 billion in military aid over the next decade, the largest package of its kind in American history. And up until the US's abstention from December's Security Council vote, the Obama administration had not allowed the passing of any other resolution which Israel opposed, adding even more complexity to Barack Obama's complicated Israel foreign policy legacy. Natalie Pohonen, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Ramallah is Noor Auda. She's a communications consultant as well as a former spokeswoman for the Palestinian Authority. And from Netanya, Rachel Avram. She's a political analyst, a writer for Jerusalem Online, and an author of Women and Jihad. Thanks both of you for joining us. Rachel, there we go. That's your book. Let's start with you, Rachel. The Israeli government and Prime Minister Netanyahu extremely upset about what had happened at the UN Security Council. Unhappy with that vote. What's the big deal with that vote?
It's problematic because under the George Bush administration, there was an understanding that certain settlements over the Green Line would be recognized by Israel in future negotiations with the Palestinians. And this basically undoes all of those understandings that were made with the George W. Bush administrations. It also goes against the peace agreements, which said that there was only supposed to be peace between Israel and Palestine via direct negotiations and not via the UN. And this basically is imposing a solution from outside instead of having direct negotiations between both parties for a two-state solution.
But Rachel, isn't it just merely asking both the Israelis and the Palestinians Palestinians to adhere to international law. So they're not saying that, say, Netanya, where you are, or Tel Aviv, they're not saying that those places are illegal. It's merely pointing out the points beyond the green line under international law, according to the Geneva Conventions, to previous Security Council resolutions and the International Court of Justice, that continuing to build on that land is a violation of international law. You don't disagree with the Geneva Conventions, do you?
The Geneva Conventions only apply to territories that were acquired belligerently by force, like what the Nazis did in many European countries during the Second World War. That's what it's supposed to rely on. What happened is Israel acquired these territories during a war of aggression, the Six-Day War, where all of the Arab armies amassed along Israel's border, kicked out the UN, closed the sheikhs to Israeli shipping.
Noor, are you convinced by any of that?
Of course not. Your guest kind of mixes facts with fiction in order to come up with a reason why Israel is upset that the world has stated international law, reiterated those laws, and stated facts about the state of affairs on the ground. The reality is Israel is occupying the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. It is still considered the occupying power in Gaza. It wants to continue to settle Israeli citizens in that occupied territory against international law, and it wants the world to recognize that. And in the meantime, it wants the world to play along when Netanyahu and his right-wing government come out and say that they're still committed to a two-state solution. The fact of the matter is, this territory is recognized as occupied territory belonging to the Palestinians. That is not under question. The applicability of the Fourth Geneva Convention is also not under question. It has been reiterated by the high contracting parties of the Fourth Geneva Convention several times, including in 2014. So there is no discussion about whether this is legal or not, whether it undermines the two-state solution or not. What we have is a government that is run by a settler agenda, as U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said earlier last week. And this settler agenda wants to colonize as much of Palestinian land as possible. It wants to render the possibility of realizing Palestinian statehood and sovereignty in occupied territory impossible. And then it wants to come to the world and say, well, you know what, it's not possible. Let's think about other solutions. Let's think about other ways to go about this. This conflict is not a bilateral conflict. It started at the United Nations in 1947. Right. And by partitioning Palestine into two states. And by the way,
I would like to
the West
say
Bank was not
something
part of the state that became Israel in 1948.
Okay, Rachel wants to come in. Rachel?
The San Remo conference determined that Jews have the right to settle over the Green Line, and this is relevant under the UN Charter. The UN Security Council resolution cannot undo international law, which said that this was part of the mandate for Palestine. And if this is occupied land, why didn't the Palestinians declare a state when Jordan occupied the area in 1948? They could have had Palestinian state in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Why didn't they demand that of the Jordanians? It's only when Israel controlled the area. And by the way, many Palestinian civilians prefer the so-called Israeli occupation to the dictatorial rule of Abu Mazen. I am in touch with Palestinian dissident Bassem Ed, who all the time talks about the human rights abuses occurring on a daily basis in the Palestinian Authority, the indoctrination of children to terrorism, robbing children of their
let's get Noor's response to that. Rachel's thrown a few bobs at you. Noor, respond.
Now what? I'm just not sure how to respond. I mean, if the argument now is that Israel is, occupying Palestinians for their benefit, then I would say that history has answered that kind of preposterous claim made by all occupying powers over time. The fact is, the Rome Statute considers the establishment of settlements by the occupying power in the occupied territory a war crime. It's not just a violation of international humanitarian law. It is a war crime as per the Rome Statute. That is not disputable. That is a fact. That is legal text. That is legal text.
It's not a belligerent occupation. It's territory that we acquired.
You know what? Screaming doesn't help you because I can't hear you right now.
Rachel, allow Noor to finish, please. Rachel, I'll come back to you. Rachel, I'm going to give you the final word in this debate.
Settlements are a war crime under the Rome Statute. That is a fact that nobody disputes.
Right.
The fact is the Palestinians made a very painful historic concession in 1988 when they accepted the two-state solution when they accepted to establish their state over 22% of historic Palestine. Right now, what this Israeli right-wing extremist Israeli government wants to do is to negotiate those 22%. What the United Nations Security Council resolution did is establish facts once again. And
no, can I jump in because we're running out of time?
Whatever it is doing
my
right
apologies
now,
for interrupting you,
Noor. Of international law,
I want to jump in because I have a question.
Palestinian rights.
I have a question related to the United States. We are running out of time. I apologize for interrupting. So you have Secretary of State John Kerry say what he said. Many Palestinians were encouraged by that. But how much does this really mean when you see the Obama administration dishing it out against Russia, dishing it out now against Benjamin Netanyahu, when people expected them to veto this resolution? But come January the 20th, all of this will probably be unraveled. And how much will all of this mean when someday soon, what might happen, President Donald Trump moves the embassy to Jerusalem? What difference will all of this make, Noor?
Can I answer?
Noor, please.
Well, I mean, what the Obama administration did was, in my opinion, a little bit too little, too late. However, Palestinians have been through many American administrations, none of them exactly friendly, all of them completely committed to Israel's agenda, and quite frankly, all of them helped preserve and entrench this occupation. The fact that the nightmare called the Trump presidency is coming on the 20th of January is worrying to all Palestinians, but it doesn't change legal facts. Palestinians will continue to use all available means, especially diplomatic means and legal means. We have already gone to the International Court of the International Criminal Court, and it is there where we are trying to defend the rights of all Palestinians to have their state on that 22%. That's where the defending of Palestinian rights will take place in the international fora, because that's where this conflict all started. The Trump presidency will make it a lot more difficult. That's what seems to be very apparent in the immediate future. Moving the American embassy to Jerusalem, if it is moved to East Jerusalem, I think this will be not just problematic, it will be a downward spiral. I don't think the international community will be able to tolerate that as well, because it is a violation of Palestinian rights. It's a violation of international law.
I want to bring in Rachel.
Palestinian people's right.
Thanks, Noor.
To have a state of their own.
I want to give the final word to Rachel. So Rachel, come January the 20th, a lot of this will be reversed. So why the need to recall the ambassadors to Senegal and New Zealand and make a big fuss over all of this if the vetoes will come back under a President Trump and Israel will have back its superpower ally?
I would like to say that the answer for this is in my book, because in recent times, there has been an increased number of Palestinian terror attacks. Not too long ago, there was arson attacks implemented by Palestinian terrorists in our country. And with this UN Security Council resolution, the international community is showing that terrorism pays. They accepted
arson attacks
the
like the ones that burned an entire Palestinian family by Israeli settlers?
Their suffering is related to misery and despair, and not related to the incitement that currently goes within the Palestinian Authority. So this resolution is a victory for terrorism, and he's creating facts on the ground that's making it very difficult for Trump to operate. And this is why Israel took such an aggressive stance related to this.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. Noor Auda and Rachel Avram, thank you very much, both of you, for joining us.